Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our panelists who will be leading today's discussion on making security decisions based on data. My name is Martin from Cy, and I'm joined by Inbar Ries, Cy's Chief Product Officer. Inbar has 2 decades of experience in taking products to markets in cybersecurity. And Dr. Nimrod Partush, Cy's VP of Data Science. Nimrod combines years of AI research experience with deep cybersecurity domain knowledge amassed at Cy and an elite IDF cybersecurity unit. Both Inbar and Nimrod are the chief architects of the Hyver platform, Cy's flagship product, which enables customers to assess, quantify, and mitigate their organizational risk so that they can improve security and invest in effective remediation. During today's program, we will delve into a discussion about cybersecurity challenges that face organizations. We will also have a product demonstration of how Hyver accurately and comprehensively assesses your organization's security and how this can help you in your endeavors to build an effective cybersecurity plan based on data. If there's any questions during this presentation, there's this webinar, just feel free to type it up in the questions in the upper right side. And if we won't get to them at the Q&A at the end, I will personally follow up with them. I'll get you an answer. So without further ado, let's get started. Nimrod, this one is for you. What data is currently presented to security professionals, and which of them helps them make decisions? What's popular right now?
Right. So the data we're seeing being presented are basically just a risk score, which comes paired with a list of findings that is prioritized by level of criticality. So you have this quite shallow list of findings, and from them, usually they generate a risk score. And that's what many security vendors are presenting to customers.
Okay, and to be honest, is that good? Is that effective in decision making? Is this the right way to do it?
Yeah, in my opinion, no, it's not the right way. More than that, it might make you make the wrong decisions if you only look at that shallow data. So, this shallow list of findings and the risk number that comes from them, it does not take into account any context. It does not look into the big picture. It doesn't tell you how the different findings are connected together into something that really puts your company at risk. So you would mitigate the critical ones, but without looking at the entire picture, you might be mitigating the wrong things.
Okay, and we're going to get back to what you said about context in a second. But for now, Inbar, this one is for you. What data is important in assessing an organization's risk, and where and how do you start collecting the data in order to make smart decisions?
Before an organization gets into the details of vulnerability and misconfiguration, the organization needs to look on a big picture, for example, and define what are the organizational threats when we're talking about external attacker that starts from the internet, or we're talking about an insider threat, an employee, a developer, a vendor, or even a physical access. So this should be the first step. Afterwards, the organization needs to define what it would like to protect. Is it customer information, employee information, business continuity, fraud, and more? And when they have that picture, they need to understand if different types of attacker can get into those business assets. And this is the major factor for calculating the risk. All the other misconfiguration and vulnerabilities available in the organization has contribution to the risk, but much, much lower. The organization needs to understand if an attacker can get into the organization, get into the business asset, extract data, how much it's going to cost the organization if something like that happened, what is the probability that something like that happened, and from that derived the risk, derived the exposure of the organization.
Right. That's great. And let me add on that, this is exactly the context I was mentioning. You need to know where you fit in those findings, the vulnerabilities that you have in this big picture of threats that lead to business critical assets. So yeah, exactly what I was aiming at with what Inbar said right now.
Okay.
Um,
And Inbar, if you could show me, like, and I see that we're jumping into the Hyver platform itself. On what you just said, you talked about threats, you talked about business context. Could you break it down basically? How do you make decisions based on the data that you collect? Because we said in the beginning with Nimrod, we said people in the market are not doing the right way. It's even giving them the wrong idea of what they're looking at. You said we have to look about threats, business context. Could you walk us through basically what's the right way to make decisions based on what data that we collected?
So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the system basically showed them the different types of attackers and also show them the different types of business assets.
Okay.
In addition to that information, we also show them the attack routes from the threats into the business asset. And the organization, the CISO and the security team can see exactly how an attacker can move laterally within the organization, how an attacker leverage on multiple misconfigurations and vulnerabilities in different environments in one picture. For example, here you can see routes in Azure, in AWS, in the internet perimeter, in the on-prem, in the OT, and eventually take all the routes from all the organization into a single place and derive decision based on that. And as you can see, the organization has multiple attack routes by leveraging on data from multiple environments. In ideal world, I should come and say, go ahead and fix everything. And even here you see subset of the issues because not all the issues contribute to a successful attack. And even the biggest organizations, they have challenges of resources, they have a challenge of budgets. And this is the reason why we activate our unique advanced algorithm that takes into account the graph, the cost, the effort, the exploitability of each one of the findings and come with a subset of findings, which should be the first step. We call them critical to block in order to disconnect the routes into the business asset. After that, we will never ever tell the CISO to stop at that point. We'll tell him go ahead and fix additional findings in order to reduce the risk and protect the business asset.
I'd like to add two things that I see here in the graph, which I also think are very important. One of them is you can see on the left hand side the threats. You can see that we're focusing on all the different threat vectors that can hurt a company, not just attackers from the internet. If you go further down the list, you can see insider threats. You can see vendors. It's crucial to have this full picture in order to get the full picture for your risk. So this is one important thing that I really like about our graph and Hyver. And the second thing is that we focus and we tell our customers to focus on the list of findings which is actually exploitable, which actually leads you somewhere. So instead of having a shallow list that can be very, very long, large organizations can have hundreds or thousands of vulnerabilities. You have just what is putting you at risk and the actual way it does that with the attacker's route to the critical assets.
I would like to emphasize and add additional points to the points which was raised by Nimrod. The system not just provide you with a recommendation, it also helps you to cope with internal challenges. For example, here we found an insecure storage of passwords within the database, and of course the security teams with the development needs to encrypt the database. And suddenly the CISO depends on third party, or maybe is a very old system which cannot be changed. The system helps him to select different type of findings and see the context. For example, here I selected to fix the unsecure upload of a file via one of the HR recruitment website, but I can see that although I selected critical finding, it didn't disconnect the same routes as the one which was high. And here I need to select another finding, which is SQL injection in the same website, and only by selecting two critical items, it's equal to the one which is high. So we can see here clearly that severity is not the right way to prioritize and plan the mitigation, although it is data. The second thing, we see how important it is to understand the factor and the impact on the business asset.
Yeah, well, interesting, because I want to get into something, because I see on the right hand side max probability 0.85, 0.87, and to go to your point, Nimrod, before that you said that a shallow analysis is just to give things a number. So not to challenge you too much, but like, what is this number, and break it down for us. How do we get to these numbers, and how do they make our decisions different?
Right. So this number is the probability for exploiting this specific finding. You can look at it as, given 100 attackers, 100 hackers at different expertise level, what's the number of them that will be able to exploit this specific finding and get an advantage in the system? So 0.74 means that 74 of the 100 will succeed in exploiting this. It can be very low for very hard to exploit findings. It can be very high if it's something that every script kiddie can exploit. So this number for each of the findings you see here is composed of many factors. We basically have data models that compute this number. It's a live number. It keeps changing all the time. It takes into account different factors like what is trending right now, the popularity of the finding, the ability of the finding to be completely automated. Is there like a full exploit for this? Is it just a proof of concept? Would only an APT be able to do this sort of attack? So all of these different numbers are aggregated into this singular number that tells us the probability of that being exploited. And each finding has their own probability, and we basically use statistic. We multiply the probabilities on the route for each business critical asset, and this gives us the likelihood for compromising a specific business critical asset. And that is the basis for our graph algorithm that eventually tells you what to mitigate first and how to reduce your risk.
I would like to emphasize on the dynamic part. The whole picture, the whole attack routes are very dynamic, because the organization never stands still. While the security team and the ATs keep on fixing things, changing the configuration in order to disconnect the routes, in parallel, the organization continue and introduce much more applications, introduce additional changes to support the business. For example, we saw that in the COVID, they introduced huge amount of applications to enable customers to perform much more actions. There is a trend and transit to the cloud. So the organization and the attack surface is constantly changing, and the changes to support the business, those changes are great, but they also reveal new attack routes. So through the whole time, some of the routes will disappear because of the mitigation, and new attack will appear. The numbers, the exploitability levels sometimes will start with a number closer to 0 because it's a 0 day or something which is very new that only a nation level can leverage on. And through the time, new attack routes will appear and the numbers can become higher. And all of that eventually being taken care of into our advanced algorithm. And in each point in time, the CISO and his teams gets the most optimized mitigation plan that they should follow, or a tool that they can adjust based on different challenges. Eventually, the CISO, the mitigation graph, is a very powerful tool to take decisions and to build mitigation, an effective mitigation plan with his security team and IT and RD if needed. But it should also convey the message to his management and board that what is at risk and what is the probability, and again, provide them numbers, quantified numbers that they can understand, can follow, can monitor. And here we provide the CISO with a risk dashboard that basically tells him and the management and board what is at risk, what is the organization importance level, what is the likelihood that an attacker, different types of attackers, will be able to get into each one of the business assets. And here he can show which threats the organization is facing per each one of the business assets. Even more, what will happen? What will be the cost if something like that happens? And this is being calculated based on our cost of breach calculator that takes into account multiple factors, and the likelihood multiple the cost of breach will give the organization exposure. And here at that point, the organization needs to define what is its major target based on what the organization is going to work. Either select the business asset with the highest importance and fix all the misconfiguration and vulnerabilities related to them, or either reduce the likelihood of the most likely business asset. And other option could be take the business asset with the highest exposure and then work to reduce its likelihood in order to reduce the exposure, and then work on that. The KPIs that the organization and the security team works needs to be very clear, and from that derive all the mitigation actions and the plans to the teams.
Okay, so basically we're reverse engineering what we said before. Instead of looking by threat and then deciding this is the most important, we'll start by the business asset that weighs the most, is the highest likely target. I'm sure it changes by industry to industry. Like someplace there'll be financial data of the customers, and someplace there'll be intellectual property. But for me, once again, I'm nitty gritty getting into the numbers. But how do you get to a number? And you talked about how you calculate. There's lots of factors, but can you drive in a bit? How do you get to like 3 to 3.3 million? Is this a guesstimation? Where does this number come from? What does it represent?
Yeah, I can take this question. So we have our cost of breach model that produces these numbers. These numbers are primarily they come from the characteristics of the company. So we take into account. We have a questionnaire. We take into account the revenue of the company, the industry, as you mentioned. Different industries have different losses. We take historical data into account, and all of them generate this detailed answer for what is the cost of breach. So let's look a little bit into the specific factors that Martin, you're probably looking here and asking yourself. So we have two kinds of losses that we define for a company. We have third-party payments, which are payments that the company would need to pay some other part, some regulatory body or a class action suit with their customers and clients that got their data exposed. So this is the third-party payments part, and we also have the company losses, actual money that would be or will immediately be lost due to the breach event. So in the third-party payments, you would see parts and factors and costs that are related to just containing the event. You'll see like the breach coach there, the notification, the call center. In case the company maintains credit card records, then there's credit monitoring. There are of course fines that you would need to pay to regulatory bodies, class action suits, and even the actual ransom you would need to pay in Bitcoin to whoever is attacking you. Now this model, the data for it comes from insurance claims. Basically, a lot of companies get breached. They have cybersecurity insurance. So that data reflects allows us to predict the damages for that part. And the other part of company losses, this is actually not predicted or reflected at all by insurers, for example. And this is what would be lost by the company. Like if their business continuity is going to get hurt by a breach, they won't be able to operate for a few days. We estimate that as well. If they're going to lose customers, if they'll have churn, we give them that prediction based on their location and their industry and different characteristics we know about them from what they gave us, from the answers they answer, and of course intellectual property they might have lost during the attack. So this model aggregates a lot of data, takes into account the answers that the company gives us, and it really helps the company estimate what would be the financial damage. A lot of customers tell us, listen, we have no way, we don't really know how to estimate this. So this could really help a company start to estimate what would a breach to each critical asset would cost, and eventually let them prioritize mitigation in the right way, in the business-oriented way.
Okay, so it looks like it's not just a simple questionnaire. We're taking some data from the company and from industry in general, but you're saying there's a data set behind this. There's some information. There's historical evidence by I'm sure it's by industry, and at the end of the day, we get a few different confirming factors to get to this number. So this is not just a guesstimation. This is a high accurate.
Yeah, it's a model. We learn from data. We learn from data we collected from companies, from companies that were breached. We followed the stocks of companies that
Really?
Get hacked. We collected reports. We collected claim data. We collected regulatory fine information. So all of this numbers and these decisions are based on a lot of data. They're not shallow at all.
Yeah, interesting. It sounds like it's also a good tool to negotiate with your cyber insurance people, to be like, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, good idea, Martin.
Okay. Anyway, so we managed to ask about what are currently people doing in the market for data. What's the right way, and what data is important to study, and therefore what's the right way to look at it on a visual context and pinpoint the attack sources and the business assets, and then tie them into each other. And then we talked about evaluating your business assets and therefore leading. I think this was short and sweet, but before we get to the questions, which I see that we already have a bit too many, so we're gonna have to pick a few. But Inbar, Nimrod, is there anything that you would like, any parting thoughts you'd like to give people that are watching right now? It's preferably security people, teams, people that talk to management, which they don't understand anything. Any parting thoughts before we jump onto the questions?
Yes, I would like to show the full decision-making process based on data. And the first data, as we said, is understanding the risk, the business asset. And let's say, for the sake of the example, I decided to work based on the business asset with highest exposure, and I would like first to reduce its likelihood in order to influence that. So, and I can see that it's customer privacy. I can jump to the graph, okay, and take the customer privacy and see all the attack routes, that leads into that business asset, and first fix the critical findings that leads into that business asset. And this way I know for sure that every dollar and every hour that I invest in really reduce the risk and really protect the business asset that I would like to, unlike other solutions that you select out of a list without knowing the context. What would be safer after fixing each one of the findings here? Will I reduce the probability of an attack, or right now I'm fixing something which an attacker cannot get into and won't be able to leverage on? So the decision making should start from the either exposure or likelihood, go to the mitigation graph, understand what can really influence, leverage on our algorithm, and then from there really start the mitigation process by leveraging on the very detailed information that we provide here in order to exfiltrate the mitigation process.
Yeah, that was a great answer, Inbar. I'll just add a little bit onto that and say that as a security professional, CISO, whichever level you are, you'd be surprised at what really is important, compared to what you might think is important, or compared to what is defined as critical. We've seen this from customers that we started engaging with. We started working, and they told us, well, listen, we already fixed these findings here, these critical findings right here. So we tell them that's great, and we ask them, but why these ones? Like, what was your decision-making process? And they can't really tell us a lot of the time anything beyond just this is a critical one. And after we finish working, or of course while we're working with them, they really see that they invested they might not have invested their time and efforts in the best way. So you might be surprised. That's what I would like people to, the viewers, to take away from this.
Okay. Well, before I thank you, we've got a few questions to get to, and just to summarize your points, it's like I feel like everyone is saying we want to reduce risk. So it's like, okay, great, we're all on the same side, but it's like putting in an antivirus or switching to one password. Yes, you have reduced risk, like checkbox, but it's like the question is, where should you be focusing and why? What's the data that backs it up? And how do you incrementally improve your security posture in the places that are most targeted or threatened outside your business? So that ends the demonstration part, and I want to jump to a few, quick questions. Let's try to get to between 1 minute and 2 minutes answers. Starting, I think this one should go to you, Nimrod. Have you recognized any new trends in how businesses address cybersecurity? I guess it's got to do with, like, people say cybersecurity is an enabler of business, so something along that lines.
Yeah. So the enablement issue is a really interesting trend that we're identifying. So it used to be companies get a CISO and they just have him there because maybe they have to, or they just want to make the job is to make sure nothing bad happens, and that's basically it. It's kind of ambiguous a lot of the times, but we're seeing a trend of businesses starting to say, we want to know like how much money is this guy saving us, this guy or this person is saving us. So it's not just having him or her there to just to have that checkbox. They really want to know what is being saved, or and beyond that, what is this generating business to us? Are they improving our security postures as it is viewed by clients? Because clients are starting to ask the question before working with the business: is this business secure? Should I go into business with them? So this is a major trend that I've seen and identified, which I think is interesting and important. And this is why businesses should invest in tools for really quantifying risk and risk reduction.
Okay, thank you for that. This one I'm gonna skip to the next one. Inbar, this one will be perfect for you because you talk to CISOs a lot. So one of the challenges of the CISO is that the board is becoming more and more involved, but still do not understand the topic of security. Oh, surprise. How do we assist the CISO in communicating with the board?
Yes, we can see that today the management and the board are very and highly involved in the security and monitoring the posture. And we can see also that they're right now even starting to add the rules and legal changes related to that. The CISO needs to simplify and explain exactly what is at risk and not what is at risk in means of security items. For example, if they will say, okay, I need to change the network structure, I need to change the Active Directory structure, I need to restructuring the whole security controls, they won't know and understand what's difference today from few months before or few years before. All they know that they provide high budgets and a lot of resources and invest a lot in security. The fact that he convert or translate all the security aspects into business aspect and tell them, guys, the customer information is at risk. An attacker that starts from the outside can get into the customer information right now and exfiltrate outside of the organization. And it's going to happen. It can happen with a probability of 50%. This is something that they can really understand and digest and know what will be the implications, okay? And the fact that this is not theoretical data is based on an attacker that mimic multiple types of attacker that used multiple techniques and multiple technologies. And this is not something which is theoretical. Someone really did and passed laterally within the organization, really convey the message and let them understand what they're facing. And again, the fact that he add the financial aspect of that, he add money next to the risk, okay? It's going to cost us that amount. Can the organization live with that amount? This is especially speaks into the risk manager, into the CFO, to the CEO. You know exactly what he's facing, and now he said, no, I cannot work with 5-10 millions of exposure. You need to take it to reduce it to a certain level that the organization can live in, and they can communicate with numbers, with data that both of them can know how to work with, and from that take security decisions.
Okay, I'm going to stay with you, Inbar, because this other question that I think we'll squeeze one more in. Can this mitigation plan, or I guess we're talking about Hyver, be flexible to the different challenges each organization faces?
Absolutely. I will show you in 1 second the Hyver again. As you saw right now, the mitigation planner is basically a tool for a CISO and his team to plan their own mitigation plan, and they can even plan multiple plans and compare between them. since all the organization has their own challenges. They have different priorities. For example, the development team need to introduce new applications to support the business, but on the other hand, they need to fix multiple security issues. So there is constantly collisions between the priority that comes from the business, that comes from the security, and the CISO needs to have a tool that helps him cope with each one of the challenges. So as we saw, he can select multiple types of findings and see exactly what will be the implications, which business asset will be safer. Or even, for example, let's say tomorrow morning he's being notified that he's going to pass some kind of audit and said, okay, I don't have time, I need to fix as much as possible. So he can select all the findings with the lowest effort and see what will be, which business asset would be much more protected, which business asset will going to remain exposed to different types of attacker. Again, how much is going to cost the organization, what will be the effort, and work based on that. Sometimes CISO said, okay, I have a very limited budget, but I still have a huge team of security teams, and I would like to start with the ones with the lowest cost, but I don't care about the effort. So he can select those and start and fix the findings with the lowest cost. Another item could be, okay, I would like to know what is the most probable route, the easiest route an attacker can take based on the exploitability and likelihood that Nimrod just explained us, and see, okay, I would like to handle this first and fix the ones that's relevant to that, and afterwards continue and work with the other. So based on different circumstances that the CISO is right now handling, he can select different findings and see what will be the implications in means of business asset, cost, effort, and it can really help him even to plan his next year budget. We are towards the second half of the year. People are starting to work even for their next budget. They need to know what to plan for.
Makes sense. Thank you. Last question, Partush, Nimrod, this is for you. I guess this is just a fan or something. Can you tell us more about the graph algorithm for picking which findings to fix?
Oh, I was hoping to get that question. It probably is a fan for the geeks out there. So to
wait, stop. We're gonna do it again. Okay, Nimrod, and go. Nimrod, this one, I guess it's for you. Could you tell? We'll finish off with this one. I guess it's someone that's heard of us or not. Can you tell us more about the graph algorithm for picking which finding to fix?
Sure. So the graph algorithms we use, this is for, I don't know, core computer scientists out there. There are basically two main algorithms. One comes from graph flow, from network flow. It's called max flow min cut algorithm. It's an algorithm that tells you which edges in a graph you should cut in order to reduce the flow the most. So when you align that into threats, probabilities, the algorithm tells us for our graph which findings should be mitigated to reduce the overall risk. And we have another algorithm, which is called the A-star algorithm. It's a search algorithm that later allows us to prioritize the findings you want to mitigate, because sometimes you don't want to cut just everything, you don't have the resources, but you do want to prioritize. You want to know which finding will reduce the risk the most. So we use the A-star algorithm for that, and it gives us a list of prioritized findings that we know that if you fix this, you will reduce the most risk, and go on, and so on and so forth.
I would
Right.
like to add to that in addition to the MinCat algorithm, we also added our own factors like cost, like effort, that in case multiple findings share the same impact, we're adding much more context into it in order to select not just the ones that we reduce the risk the most and disconnect the routes, but also the ones that are very easy to implement and they are very cost effective.
Inbar, Nimrod, thank you so much for your time. Also, thank you mostly to whoever's watching this. And I apologize ahead of time to the few questions that we didn't get to. I will personally reach out via email, LinkedIn, and answer them. And if you have any other questions for either Nimrod or Inbar, reach out to me, reach out to them. If you reach out to me, I'll hunt them down personally and get them to answer it, even though they're quite busy sometimes. And aside from that, it was great having you here. I hope we learned something. I hope this was interesting.
Thanks, Martin. It was great talking to you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
And
great having you here.
anyway, see you on the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.